Diana,
And I'm Nick.
and this is Team RCIA, not Tuesday, Wednesday with Team RCIA, and it's been a minute.
Yeah.
It's been
And
a while.
we've been traveling a bit, as many of you know. And last night, in the midst of torrential rain, we ended up in Chicago. So
Fine,
we're almost across the street from Wrigley Field.
almost. Go Cubs.
No, go Giants.
Go Cardinals. We saw a Cardinals game. Anyways, that's not what we're here to talk
We're
about.
here to talk about sponsors. Sponsors in the catechumenate process, which are critical members of your team. And I know many of you do a great job recruiting and training sponsors. And if you're more like me, you don't do such a great job.
Well, it's a lot of times we approach the role of sponsors as RCI coordinators. We think of sponsors as people who are supposed to be the model Catholic for our seekers, and a lot of times potential sponsors see that as the job description. They're supposed to know everything.
Yeah, so that's part of it. And the other part for me is I'm just shy, and so it's hard for me to walk up to somebody and ask them if they want to be a sponsor. But I tend to let potential sponsors off the hook just by not approaching them and not reminding them in a gentle, loving way of their baptismal responsibility.
So Nick wrote a blog post this week on the Team Arcea website. I'll put a link to that in the comments box here. But basically, he talks about three main responsibilities of what a sponsor does.
Yeah, and these responsibilities they come from the right itself, and the important thing about them for you, if you're a coordinator or somebody who's responsible for recruiting sponsors, is one of the roadblocks that I have in trying to ask somebody to be a sponsor is they say to me, "Well, what do I have to do?" And then I get a little tongue tied because it can become very big and complex. But if you boil it down to what the right actually says a sponsor does, it is a very important role, but it's not massive and overwhelming. It is something that every Catholic, every kind of awake Catholic, comes to Sunday on church and participates in the parish Catholic. Every one of those folks can can do this work because it doesn't require that they be master catechists. It doesn't require that they have tons and tons of people skills, but they do have to have an empathy for the person who's seeking to take a next step on their journey of faith.
So before we take a look at some of the responsibilities of this really not difficult but critical role in the RCIA process, let's remind ourselves the sponsor's role begins officially at the rite of acceptance into the order of catechumens. But if we look at the RCIA text closely, we'll notice that the sponsor's role actually begins long before the rite of acceptance happens.
Yeah, the rite of acceptance is when we first meet the unbaptized seekers. That they're standing outside the church. The church comes out to encircle them to greet them, and basically the pastor or the presider says to the seeker, what do you ask of us and what do you ask of God's church? And we hear that from the seeker, and then he turns to the sponsor and says, basically, is this person ready? And the sponsor has to be able to say yes to that. Well, to say yes authentically, the rite says sponsors are persons who have known and assisted the candidates and stand as witnesses to the candidate's moral character, faith, and intention. That's in
That's
paragraph 10 of the
yes.
RCIA.
So that, I mean, that sounds pretty substantial and important.
Yeah.
When they're being a witness to the candidate's moral character, faith, and intention, when they have known the candidate and are ready to assist the candidate. Now, taking one other step back here, when the RCIA uses the word candidate, here in part one of the RCIA text, it's talking about unbaptized seekers. The word candidate in this instance, it means the candidate for the rite of acceptance into the order of catechumens. And so it's not, don't think these are baptized people. The candidate in the rite of acceptance is the unbaptized seeker who is ready to become a catechumen.
And just to add on to that, even though we're talking about the sponsors for unbaptized candidates in this section of the rite, the same principles apply to the sponsors for the baptized candidates. So in other words, the both kinds of sponsors, sponsors for the unbaptized and sponsors for the baptized, need to have the same kind of qualities and have similar jobs to do.
So let's break it down. The first thing is that the sponsor has to know the candidate before they're ready to take on their official role. So that means you're going to be pairing up sponsors and seekers long before you schedule the rite of acceptance so that they could get to know one another.
In that section we just read, paragraph 10, really does give the whole job description of the sponsor. If you break that paragraph apart or that sentence apart, there are basically three things there that a sponsor has to do.
Yeah, so that first part is to get to know the candidate.
Right. And the second part then is to assist the candidate. So if I'm imagine Diane and I are strangers and the coordinator has paired us up and she's getting to know me and my faith journey and where I want to get to. The next step is she has to be willing to help me get there. And again, not by knowing everything the catechism says, but by being a supportive person, by being someone who's empathetic to my story, being someone who's going to encourage me when I get discouraged, pat me on the back when I'm doing well, tell me her faith stories that, so I can see that, oh, she's not a perfect Catholic and I don't have to be perfect either. I just have to be trying a little bit. So assist the candidate means basically being a friend to the candidate.
So if we put those two responsibilities together, getting to know the candidate and then assisting the candidate, the sponsor really first has to be a good listener to hear the candidate's stories and their needs, and then to be a good sharer of their own faith, a person who is willing to talk about his or her own struggles in faith, how they live their Catholic faith in their daily life. And those are really basic things that we hope any Catholic would be able to do with someone who is unbaptized, with someone who is seeking more in their life in Christ.
One way to think about the job description of a sponsor in these first two, there's a third one, but in these first two things that we're identifying, get to know the candidate, assist the candidate. In the rite of acceptance, the sponsor is supposed to put his hand on the shoulder of the candidate when the sponsor states that the candidate is ready. So that hand on the shoulder is a sign of connection and support and witness about this person. And if you imagine that figuratively, that hand is kind of always there. That throughout that inquiry period, evangelization inquiry period, the sponsors kind of always got their hand on the shoulder of the candidate, even if it's a metaphorical hand. That's kind of the job, is to be that rock, be that support, so that when we get to the rite of acceptance and the hand is physically on the shoulder, it's really an extension of everything that's been going on up until that point.
And so that hand on the shoulder is more about being present for their companion. It's not really about knowing everything about being Catholic. The sponsor is not going to need a theology degree or anything like that to do their role, but they do need to be present for the companion. And that means helping their companion make it to Mass on Sunday, get to the things that the parish is doing throughout the year, checking in with their sponsor. These are basic ministries of presence that they are responsible to do. And if they're asked, if their catechumen asks them a question that they don't really know about or don't feel comfortable responding to, the sponsor can guide their candidate, their catechumen, to someone in the parish who can talk more about that question or that topic.
Now, this third part of the job description might be the stumbling block for a lot of Catholics. So the third part of the job description is that they stand up as a witness and they testify to the readiness of the candidate to take this next step. And the rite says that they have to testify to the candidate's moral character, faith, and intention. And a lot of Catholics that I know, and including myself, would recoil at that a little bit and say, who am I to judge this person's moral character or their faith or their intention? Well, so first of all, let's look at what the rite says, and then we'll kind of break down what the rite is asking. Because again, it's not anything superhuman. It's not anything any of us can't do. The rite says, before the rite of acceptance is celebrated, therefore, sufficient and necessary time is required in each case. Enough time should be set aside to evaluate and, if necessary, to purify the candidate's motives and dispositions. With the help of the sponsors, catechists, deacons, parish priests, and pastors have the responsibility for judging the outward indications of such dispositions.
So there it says, with the help of the sponsor. The rite says that because it is assuming that the sponsor has already built a relationship with this candidate, with this seeker. And so that getting to know responsibility is very important in order for the sponsor to be able to do this third part of their responsibility.
And again, look at that list of people that are involved in making this judgment. The sponsor is just one cog in the gear that's going to turn this process. So it's not all up to the sponsor to make this judgment. And the other thing I would say is I don't ever really use that word judgment. That's the word that's in the rite, but the word that I'm more comfortable with and I think is really intended by the rite is discernment. What we're doing is we're discerning if this candidate is ready to take this step today. We're not saying they're never going to be worthy or they're never going to be available. We're just saying they might need some more time in the period of evangelization to really encounter Christ in a way that's deep enough to sustain them through the hard work of the catechumenate. So it's really a pastoral discernment process and not a judgment about the worthiness of the person.
And in that paragraph, in paragraph 43, I love the word to purify, if necessary, to purify the candidate's motives and dispositions. Now, we all know that people come to us with different motivations for becoming Catholic, for becoming baptized. Sometimes they're getting married and someone told them they had to become Catholic, or they feel guilty that they never became baptized or what, or a family member is pressuring them. We want to find out what those motivations are, and the sponsor is able to first hear those motives from the candidate, and then to help them kind of, if their motives aren't necessarily aligning with what we hope a disciple would be, the sponsor can help them kind of talk through or dig deeper into maybe a better motivation for becoming Catholic, and to kind of be the gauge of when they start seeing that shift. And they're going to be looking for those markers of readiness that are found in paragraph 42 of the RCIA. And these are really basic marks of readiness that show the appropriate disposition and motivation for the rite of acceptance. And some of those markers are things like an intention to change their life, a beginning of prayer, beginning of prayer life, they've started to get to know people in the parish. Were there other
to have a feeling or a sense of repentance? And the thing about all these, you can go to paragraph 42. I think there's about 8 or so of criteria listed there. But what's common to each one of them is none of them require success. They're all sort of beginning levels,
Yes.
so there has to be the beginning of a prayer life. It doesn't have to be, oh, they've got a wonderful prayer life. They have to have a sense of repentance. They don't have to have actually repented. They just have to have a sense that, oh, maybe I need to do something different in my life. Without, they can start they can become catechumens without actually having changed their lives yet. They just kind of have to have a desire and a beginning of a turn toward Christ. That's what we mean by judging their readiness or judging their intention. We're discerning if they actually have heard the call of Christ and have begun to feel the love of Christ and are now starting to respond to that.
So those are just some basic things about the role and responsibilities of sponsors in the RCIA itself. And tomorrow, we are going to have a free community chat. And a community chat is basically a free webinar. It goes officially about an hour, but Nick and I stay online for usually another half hour just to talk with the participants and to answer any questions and to hear how things are going. But tomorrow we're going to be talking about the role of sponsors and why it's so important.
We're going to talk about why the role is so important, what the role really is, how you go about recruiting and training sponsors for this important role, and then what would happen if we actually did this. And as
So-
Diana said, that's going to take us about an hour,
Yep.
and we hope that you'll be with us. Now, if you miss it, you miss it. It's going to be online, or it's just going to be available live in that hour, unless unless you are a member of Team RCIA, and we'll tell you more about that at the webinar tomorrow. How to become a member of Team RCIA, and all members get free access to the recording once the webinar is over.
And not just free access to that webinar recording, but to all the webinar recordings, all the video marathons, all the courses.
Everything we've created in the last 15
Everything.
years. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So hopefully you can join us. So that's tomorrow. What is it? August 26th?
I think that's right.
August 26th
It's
tomorrow.
Thursday.
11 a.m. Pacific time, 2 p.m. Eastern. Now, usually Nick and I are in San Jose, Northern California, which is Pacific time, but now we're in Chicago, which is Central time.
So we got to remember to get on at 1 o'clock.
1 o'clock Central time. Okay, so
We'll probably start at 11 out of habit.
yeah, but it's 11 Pacific, 1 o'clock Central, 2 o'clock Eastern. Everyone else, there's lots of resources online to figure out the time zone.
And we have a link where people can sign up. Is that in
Yes,
there?
I put the link for the free sign up to tomorrow's community chat in the chat box. So go ahead and check that out. And Joanna, I will help you. I know Fiji. I'll post
It's
that
going to be
in
Friday in Fiji, Joanna's telling us.
6 a.m. I remember. Oh my gosh. Yes. Well, we always look forward to having you join us, Joanna, from wherever anyone is in the world. We really appreciate your presence and look forward to
And send out the
gathering
link to your friends and colleagues. We'd like to get as many people as possible there so we can really share this information with folks.
I know, and it's been a few months since we've done a free webinar community chat. I think it was May was the last time we did it or so, because we had a June online seminar and a July video marathon. So now we're back onto our monthly free webinar. So hope to see you tomorrow, and thanks again for all of the things that you do in RCIA ministry.
All right, everyone. Take care. Have a great day. God bless.
Bye.